All right, so we have Filippo Fish. He wants to debate. Maybe we can do a short little debate.
Sure.
Whether or not morality must come from God. Okay, so we'll invite Philip up. Here we go. Go for it.
Hiya, folks. How y'all doing?
Hey, doing well. How you doing, Filippo Fish?
Not bad.
So what's up?
My question is, on the server I debate with a lot of Christians, and in life I know a lot of Christians. I did come from Catholic school, and I do know the Bible. One thing I keep hearing from them, which I disagree with, is that if you are not a Christian, then you have no morality whatsoever, and there's nothing holding you back from doing immoral thing. I want to hear what your take is on that point. That seem very sophisticated.
Sure. Well, yeah, there's a lot of things that we believe that don't seem very sophisticated to people who don't believe them. And believe me, that's a two-way street too. There's a lot of things that I hear from atheists that I'm like, well, that doesn't sound very sophisticated. But, you know, when you're in a worldview, whether it's an atheistic worldview or a Christian worldview, there are going to be a lot of things that you hold, a lot of positions that you hold, a lot of convictions that you have that are not going to make sense to someone who doesn't share those convictions. So maybe we can define our terms here, Filippo Fish. What, when you say moral, what do you mean by that?
Well, the typical thing people say is that if you don't accept God into your heart, then there's nothing stopping you from raping and murdering someone or robbing them. And, that's something that is said by, pastors. It's been said by people my age. And sorry, I got my dog in the background.
I was wondering what that was. You got a good boy there.
Yeah,
good girl.
She just had a bad experience at the dog park, so now she's all upset.
Oh, poor girl.
So, I don't buy that. Obviously, because I've never wanted to murder anybody.
Okay.
I've never wanted to steal from anybody, and I sure as heck don't believe in any God. So, how do you reconcile that point? Is that a point that you would make, that you can only find morality through God?
Well, again, it depends on what you mean by moral. So are there non-Christians who don't go around murdering people? Yeah, obvious, more than not, sure. But, hopefully we can raise the bar a little higher than just, I don't murder people and that makes me moral. From a Christian perspective, when we talk about morality, we're talking about holiness. We're talking about righteousness. So we're not just talking about, this baseline requirement of, don't murder someone, don't rape anybody, don't, pillage. For the way we understand morality is we try to stand with Jesus Christ on this. We try to hold to his standard, which is absolute perfection. So you have to understand, Filippo Fish, when we're talking about morality, we're not just talking about these baseline moral requirements that we all need to hold to in order for society to work. We're talking about in your heart of hearts. So for example, what many people believe, and I'm one of them, is the greatest moral. What is this? Someone's got.
All right, I'm just turning off my car.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
Sorry about everybody.
All good. So the greatest moral teaching of all time can be found in Matthew. So the Bible is divided up into 66 different books. And one of those books is called Matthew. And in Matthew chapter 5 through 7, we have the greatest moral teaching of all time. This is what I believe. I think it's objectively true. And in those passages, what we have is we have Jesus of Nazareth laying out a definition of morality that so transcends anything that you or I are capable of accomplishing on our own that it's mind-boggling. So he goes, you've heard that it said, do not murder. Okay, good. So far, so good. But then he goes, but I tell you that if you hate your neighbor, you hate your brother, you've already murdered him in your heart. Well, at this point, Filippo, you and I should be going, uh-oh. Like, if that's the standard, I've hated people. I've thought hateful thoughts about people. Maybe not that I haven't even articulated them, but I've certainly thought them. It's a knee-jerk reaction sometimes. And then Jesus goes, you've heard that it said don't commit adultery. All right, yeah, so far so good, fine. But then he goes, but I tell you, if you look at a woman with lustful intent, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. Now, again, this is where you and I go, oh boy, oh no, like I've committed that sin many countless times. When
you say this, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
When you say these things, it seems to me that these are, manipulation techniques that any con man will use.
Oh, really?
I know. I mean, guilt is a powerful emotion, and if you apply guilt to a human being for something that he cannot control himself to do, and you put enough pressure on him, he will find a way to alleviate himself of the guilt. So this is a big 1-2 punch, right? The number one, feed him with the guilt with something that he cannot stop. Number two, give him this magical solution to this imaginary guilt, which would be to state to someone like yourself or a pastor or a priest or something that he believes in this, and then, submit a tithe, a certain amount of money every year, 10%.
Right.
Like,
sure.
We live in a world of multi-level marketing, and we live in a world where Ken Copelands exist.
Yeah.
Like, I can't see anything beyond the financial scam that it is.
Okay, Filippo Fish, I want to just summarize what you just said, just so I can make sure I understand and you hear what you said. I started talking about lust in the heart, murder in the heart, hatred, and you immediately went to guilt. You said manipulating people's guilt is a con man's technique. I didn't say anything about guilt. You brought up guilt, and
of course it did.
Right.
Because
so
I followed what you were saying.
Yeah. But we're real quick though, Filippo Fish. What you just expressed.
A tool.
Well, what you just expressed is the human condition. You hit on something. Now you were sort of an adversarial agreement. You were in adversarial agreement with Jesus, because the fact is we are all guilty for these things. And one thing you might need to consider is that guilt.
I disagree with that point. I don't believe that there is any real guilt, like any factual guilt on the person.
Oh, so you
simply as a person has provided the emotion of guilt to you.
Oh,
as a listener.
Well, that's so Filippo Fish. That's interesting, because so now we're going to get into a worldview divide here. Because for me, I don't define hatred of my neighbor as a moral thing. I actually view that as immoral. So like, I stand with Jesus on that. So I go, yeah, hatred actually is immoral. And the guilt that I feel over that is real because I am guilty of that immoral activity. I also view lusting after my neighbor's wife or someone I'm not married to, I view that as immoral. I actually do. Maybe you don't. Maybe you've got a different standard of morality, which we should probably get to. But for me, I look at these things and I go, yeah, that is immoral. You're right. I can totally see that standard. The problem, and this is where the disconnect comes in, or the dissonance, is those actions are so universal that we do have this knee-jerk reaction to go, well, if they're normal or if they're something I can't control, therefore they must be good. Well, no, as a Christian, I don't believe that. I don't believe that all my natural urges are necessarily good. If that's true, then you actually can't condemn murder, because people do commit murder based on their urges. And it's like if my urges are what determine what's good or bad, I'm in a lot of trouble, because my urges tell me to do a lot of bad things. And now I no longer have a standard for good and bad. So before you rebut that, does that make sense? Do you at least see where I'm coming from?
No, because it's a matter of degree, and the nuance is lost when you say it that way. But more importantly, I have.
Hold on, can you explain that? I'm not seeing that.
I'll get to that.
Well, before we move on though, that's an important point. I feel like I'd like you to explain that.
I'll explain that by how I view the human mind compared to how you view. It seems that you view the human mind. I view the mind as a tool. Right, a tool that has come about and evolved for whatever reason to allow us to simulate how reality can turn out for our own benefit. So, for example, the reason why you would lust after another woman is perhaps related to your reproductive urges. And you would simulate in your mind what it would be like to do that. Because, it was in the past, our obligation genetically to pass on our genetics to the next line. We see that as something we want to do.
It still is, yeah.
With regards to hate, right? Threat assessment is a very important thing about survival.
Yeah.
Where you hate someone who threatens you. You hate someone who may take something from you. You hate someone who's threatening your position in a social environment. We're complicated animals that need to survive in a very complicated society. Like the feeling of hate is useful.
So in your mind then, hatred and lust are actually they're fine. Those are amoral activities. So then why not? So then murder would apply in that same category.
Activities, in my opinion, they're not activities. They're thought processes.
Okay, so
activities would be you actually acted upon it and murdered someone. And these
no, but what
we have.
Now we should get into that though, and if you don't mind, because in the interest of time, I want to try to keep this going because we do need to probably wrap this up very soon. I don't want to miss this. Help me understand what is your standard by which you judge hatred as moral and murder as immoral?
I don't see hatred as immoral, first of all.
But what is the standard by which you judge that?
Well, when thought becomes reality as standard, and if you're providing harm to somebody, what is a sin to me is harming somebody in some way.
Why is that?
Let's say I called someone I hated a really mean name, and he felt emotionally harmed by that, I would call that a sin. On the other hand, if I just picked up a rock and threw it at his head and he died, that would also be a sin.
Why is that? Why is that? Why? Like I'm not seeing.
It affects another sovereign human being.
So I agree with that, but you just espouse something like a Darwinian view of man that says we sort of arose through these, maybe I misinterpreted you, but it sounded like it's sort of a Darwinian evolutionist kind of view that, we are, the product of, our minds are tools that evolved through time and chance acting on matter. But where do you get sovereignty from that and morality?
Well, here's what I'm thinking. I don't believe that the Darwinian view is prescriptive. I believe it is descriptive. It just basically says this is the state of nature.
Right, but morality, again, in the interest of time, don't you see morality as being prescriptive?
It's just prescriptive, as in, the Darwinian view just explains to us, how this occurs, why are we the way that we are.
Right.
It helps us to better understand that. But it doesn't tell us that we must act in a survival of the fittest way, which a lot of people on this Discord actually talk about.
Right.
I don't believe that that's what it means we should do.
Exactly.
It means that that's how we think.
That's Filippo Fish. That's exactly it. There is nothing in the Darwinist worldview that can possibly be prescriptive. Morality, by definition, is prescriptive. It's normative. So you would
not go to Darwinian theory. You wouldn't go to evolutionary biology for something prescriptive. That's not the point of that study.
No, right? But Filippo Fish, to have a coherent
organizational behavior would be
to have a
more useful.
Yes, but we're talking about psychology that is being done by evolved fish. By collocations of atoms that were assembled randomly over millions or billions of years. So whatever those fish or those bags of protoplasm, however you want to view human beings, you said it was a tool that evolved for whatever purpose. First of all, a tool can't evolve. A tool is by definition purposeful. So I don't like that analogy, but I get what you're getting at.
The purpose gets the purpose comes after the thing evolves. The thing.
That's not a tool though.
That's selection forces it to. Yeah, it is a tool in the end.
Okay,
we're using it as a tool. We're using our minds as a tool. I'm using my fingers as a tool.
Yeah, Filippo Fish. Here's the thing. Here's the cognitive dissonance I think you find yourself in, and we really do have to move on. But you're trying to wedge in moral prescriptions into a universe that you believe is guided by random chance. You can't, philosophers have shown this, Hume showed this, you cannot get an ought from an is. You are correct that neo-Darwinian.
I'm not talking about any oughts.
Well, morality, well then now you've lost morality. That's what morality is.
Is also a tool, right? The fact that I feel a certain way about this is also a tool for our organism as a society. Yeah,
Filippo Fish, I don't know if you can see it, but you've just given up morality. We actually have to move on, but...
No worries. Yeah, we can give you a part two if we can...
Yeah, maybe we can come back around.
No worries. Thank you so much, Filippo Fish.
Okay, that about wraps it up for this episode. The Think Podcast is a production of the Think Institute and is produced by yours truly, Joel Settecase. The Think Institute operates under Church Movements, a ministry of Cru under the division of Cru City. To learn about how to support the Think Institute and my family tax-free, go to thethink.institute/partner. I hope you heard something helpful today. I know I did. Remember, this is not goodbye. This has just been a short stop on the journey as we learn to lead our families in defending the Christian message. And we'll see you next time. Until then, I hope it made you think.